It's Nichol Spohr here today for SimonsSaysStamp.com, and today I'm super excited to be sharing the first project in a new series called Making the Cut. These projects are predominantly going to be die cut projects that are supported with some stamping, stenciling, and other fun techniques. My first project today is going to feature these die cut pet window cards. So one of my very favorite things to do is to combine product from multiple companies to create truly unique scenes. I knew I wanted to use the picture book Chihuahua, Labrador, and French Bulldog, as well as the Sweet Kitty, which you'll see here in a little bit, with a window of some sort. This design was inspired by the sentiment, "If humans were more like you, the world would be a better place." These sentiments were combined from the Simon Says stamp, Like You Words and Dies. So that's kind of the theme for this card, and I thought it would be cute if the picture book animals are peeking out a window. So I went to my stash looking for some window dies. The dies I'm choosing to use today are the Honeybee Stamps Cottage Window. Now, this is a pretty big die set. However, it works really great with the picture book dies, the regular size picture book dies. I want to mention that. There are two different sizes here at Simon Says Stamp. So there's the big picture book dies, which are going to take up a much bigger area, and then these are the traditional picture book dies. Great for scene building. And I wanted to combine these three dogs in a window, like they're peeking out of a window. So the dies from the Honeybee Stamps Cottage Window Die set are big. There's the window frame, there's the molding that goes across the top of the window, there's curtains that go inside, and then there's the flower box and shutters. The shutters are what really make this a big card if you choose to use them. So on my first card design, I am creating a 5x7 card using the shutters. I have die cut the window, the shutters, the molding, and the flower box from Nina Smooth White Cardstock, and I'm adding shading with Copic markers. We're using Copic markers in Warm Gray 2 and 00 to just add that great shading to the shutters that gives them depth and dimension. When I put them side by side there, you can definitely see the difference. Today I'm adding depth and dimension to many of the dies used in the scenes with Copic markers. You can use other alcohol ink markers if you like, or other coloring mediums like colored pencils or other markers as well. Even ink blending works great to add that depth and dimension to die cut images. I'm also using Warm Gray 2, 1, and 00 to add shading to the molding for the top of the window, the flower box, and even the window frame itself. Although that is really, really light, I'm not adding a ton, just enough to give a little bit of shading here and there. Once I have these pieces shaded with my Copic markers, I'm ready to add some interest to some of the other die cut pieces. That's going to be the curtains that are going to hang in the window. I'm using my Misty, and I'm placing the die cut curtains inside. These have been die cut from Simon Says Stamp Smoke Cardstock. It includes both side panels and then the valance that goes across the top. I'm placing them in my Misty and using the My Favorite Things all lined up background die with some Lawn Fawn Yeti White pigment ink to add some texture and interest to the curtains so that they're not just solid. This is very subtle, but a great and effective way to add interest to a scene card. Once I have added the plaid detailing to my curtains, I'm ready to start assembling a few of the pieces. So I kind of wanted to work in little bits and pieces. We built our window first, and then we're going to fill the window with our dogs, and then we're going to place everything kind of on our background card base and add in sentiments. We're going to start with the background, and I played around with several different colors for the background and ultimately chose to use Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock. This was trimmed to about 3¼ inches by 4 inches, and then the side panel window curtains were added and the valance across the top. I don't want to adhere the window yet because we need to put the dogs in the window like they're sitting on the back of the couch or something peeking out. But I want to assemble the molding for the top of the window, and the window frame is just wide enough that some Lawn Fawn double-sided adhesive is going to work great there. We're just going to line up that molding along the top edge of the window. And I'm going to lay it over the top to kind of just double check everything. I will also use some double-sided adhesive, and this is about 1/8 of an inch wide, so it's really skinny. I love double-sided adhesive for this. A lot less messy than liquid adhesive. And we're going to place the shutters on either side. Now this is the step in the second card that I left out to make the images fit on an A2 sized card base. So this is an A7 card base, the 5x7 size, because that window is going to be pretty massive when you add those shutters. We'll add the shutter on the right side as well. And our window is looking good. Next, we're going to start adding some shading to the die cut animal pieces. As I mentioned earlier, we're using the Simon Says Stamp picture book, French Bulldog, Labrador, and Chihuahua. We're starting with the picture book French Bulldog first, which has been die cut from some Lawn Fawn ground coffee cardstock and smooth white cardstock. This is a really dark brown cardstock that I'm adding some shading to with Copic markers. The little bit of shading adds a big difference in the finished design. In addition to the ground coffee and white cardstock, we're using a little Hero Arts peony cardstock for the insides of the ears. I didn't die cut the dog from an additional piece of cardstock to add black for the eyes. Instead, we're going to be replacing those eyes with some Nouveau crystal drops, and we're going to be doing that for all 3 dogs. We're adding some warm gray shading to the other parts of the dog as well. One of my favorite tips is to add multiple layers to noses. So because the French Bulldog and any of these picture book animals needed to be die cut multiple times, I'm going to have extra pieces. So I have an extra piece of the ground coffee cardstock. You can place that underneath the white to give that portion of the dog's face a little bit of depth and dimension. That's one of my favorite tips for giving faces or other prominent features a little bit more dimension, is using those leftover cardstock pieces. We'll also be doing that for the nose, which I want to die cut, or I want to use the dark die cut for the nose and have it popped up. I usually like the nose to be about 1 layer more than the most layers we've used. So the face part, we'll just add another layer for the nose. For the Labrador, I have die cut this little sweetie from Lawn Fawn Gold Rush and paper bag cardstocks. I'm adding some shading with my Copic markers. It's definitely easier to see the shading on the lighter cardstock colors. Again, we will be adding depth and dimension by popping up the face with 2 layers, the ears with 2 layers, and then the nose, I think, is going to end up with pretty much 3 layers there, so it really stands out. I keep using the cottage window frame as a guide because I don't want the dividers in the window to go through the face of any of the critters, and we'll lose the cute little expressions and faces. So I keep double checking. I've also not placed my dogs at the very bottom of the panel. So they're really kind of about where the bottom of the frame meets, maybe not even quite, and that's okay because the flower box is going to cover that up. And that way you get to see more of the dog image and it's not tucked under too much of anything. So sweet. Finally, we have our Chihuahua. That has been die cut from Simon Says Stamp's slate gray cardstock and white cardstock. Again, we will add some simple shading with Copic markers to our cute little Chihuahua as we place him right here next to the Labrador. I completely filled this window with 3 dogs. You could use any of the critters from the picture book collection. I focused on pets today simply because I thought that the sentiment really worked well for all of the pet lovers out there, and we don't want to leave those cat lovers out. So the next card is everything is the same. I switched up the color of the curtains and I switched up the animal I used, and I used the cat instead. And I'll show you the coloring of that in a little bit. But other than that, the creation is exactly the same. We're going to leave the shutters off and fit this window on an A2 sized card base. You could choose to use one of these dogs or all of them, just like I did here. I love scene building as it really tells a story almost in card form. So we're adding the ears. You might notice that I ended up tipping the Chihuahua's head just a little bit. That's because I didn't want the ear to completely cover the Labrador's eye. It was really important to me that I move that just a tiny little bit so it's not covering up the eye too much. Again, the Chihuahua has some PEONY cardstock for the insides of the ears, shaded with R30. Now that we have our dogs in place, I'm just adding some additional detail with some Copic markers. And we're going to add some ebony black Nouveau crystal drops for the eyes. This is so much easier than having to die cut multiple passes of these picture book animals just to get black eyes. So I really feel like it's a little bit less paper waste this way. Black gems or other kind of enamel dots would also work here. I've glued the window frame in place using that same 1/8 inch double-sided adhesive and secured it over the background. A crystal katana comes in so handy when dealing with these little pieces like noses or eyes or whatever it might be. For the flowers that go in the flower box, I have die cut these from Hero Art's PEONY cardstock and Lawn Fawn cilantro cardstock. We're going to shade these flowers with our 30, 32, and 35. This is going to give some great depth and dimension to the flowers, and also these will serve as a fantastic pop of color on an otherwise very neutral card. For the leaves, I'm using YG13 and YG17, and then I'm just going to kind of double check and see how I like that. Before I add the picture, or the flower box below the window, I'm going to stamp one of those sentiments from the Simon Says Stamp Like You Words and Dies using Lawn Fawn Hippo ink. So the sentiment really works and kind of moves throughout our scene. I'm adhering the flower box with some foam adhesive along the bottom edge just to make it pop up a little bit, and then just the double-sided adhesive along the bottom edge. But we have to build our house background. To do this, I trimmed a card base that measures, let's see, 10 by 7. And then we're going to score it in half, so it's a 5 by 7 smooth white card base. And using Tim Holtz bricked stencil and the Lawn Fawn Hippo ink, we're going to create a bricked house background just around the edges. The center of the card doesn't matter so much since the window will be taking up that space. Look how much of a difference that great little bricked detail adds to our window scene. I'm going to put some adhesive here on my card, and then we'll place our window with shutters right to the center of our card base. And I guess I haven't secured the window over that yet. That is looking really good. So let's go ahead and just add the window there. And take our 1/8 inch adhesive, double-sided adhesive, and foam adhesive to the back of our flower box. So here you can see what I was talking about a minute ago, and place that right at the bottom of the scene. This will be the perfect place to tuck our greenery and flowers and add that pop of color to our card. The flowers are all from the Honeybee Stamps Bunch of Bouquets set. And this has lots of vases and a watering can and stems and all kinds of flower pots and all kinds of flowers in it. I just chose to use a couple of the flowers and a couple of the greenery pieces for my card here. You can see how seamlessly the Honeybee Stamps and the Simon Says Stamp dies work together to create this die cut scene card. For our sentiment, the big portion of the picture frame above where our dogs are sitting is a great open space for a sentiment. So I've die cut the Like You die first from some slate gray cardstock for the shadow and then white cardstock for the more detailed Like You, and place that one on top of another right there in the top portion of our window. Our sentiment is starting to come together. We still have a little bit left to add, but I want to put something heavy on top so that the adhesive holds that down in place while the glue dries. This is a great time to go ahead and color in the rest of our flowers. Again, I'm using R30, 32, and 35 for these flower centers, and YG 13 and 17 for the greenery. Each flower box is going to have an assortment of greenery and about 5 pink blooms. You could use more or less depending on how you want to put together your flower box. You could also add additional colors if you wanted to for more variety. Now that I have my shading done, it's time to put all of this together. We have just a couple more things to do to finish up this 5 by 7 card. Liquid adhesive is really helpful for adding all of these little pieces inside the flower box. I'm using the Lawn Fawn glue tube, gluing these all down. If any of them aren't staying put, I love to use some craft tweezers to help hold it in place. Glossy Accents is also being applied to the noses of the dog so that they're nice and shiny. Instead of die cutting the flower centers for my flowers in the flower box, I'm instead going to take some Nouveau Crystal drops in English mustard and add those to those flower centers instead. I really like this look and it eliminates a lot of extra die cutting. Plus it gives some nice dimension to those flower centers. Finally, I'm going to add some little Sweethearts heart embellishments, a little trio here, one at the end of the sentiment and a couple up in the shutters for a little pop of color. Now we still need to finish adding the rest of our sentiment. The rest of this which is actually the first part of the sentiment, comes again from the Like You Simon Says stamp set. This is a great stamp set with a variety. You can really build a lot of different kinds of Like You sentiments, but I chose this one because I thought it worked really great with these critter and pet images. Once I've stamped and embossed the sentiment on slate gray cardstock, I'm going to die cut this with one of the Simon Says Stamp Sentiment Labels dies. Now these dies are extra long, so I'm going to die cut it on one end, flip it around, and die cut the other end. So I'm going to just pop that out, line this up again to shorten our little sentiment label, run that through again to get the label the right length, and then we can adhere this to our card. And I decided to add a little foam adhesive back behind it and add it right there up above the Like You die cut sentiment, kind of shifted over to the right window pane. And there is our card. Now the glossy accents has dried, and so has the Nuvo crystal drops, so I can easily go in with a white gel pen and add some detail. For our cat version of the card, everything is exactly the same except for coloring in our cat. So I have got some additional warm gray markers here in warm gray 5, and I'm going to add a little shading, a little R30 for the cheeks, but I'm adding in some stripes for our cat. And this is the Picture Book Sweet Cat. So adorable, and I love the tail. I think that is really prominent in the finished card. You can see the cat sitting in one of the window panes, and then the tail is in the other one. And it just takes up a little more room, and this shows you how you can use just one of the animals in the window if you want to. I'm also using my warm gray markers in 2 and 00 to add some additional shading to my cat image. You can see I've bricked the background of an A2 top fold card base with that same Tim Holtz bricked stencil and Lawn Fawn Hippo ink. Same thing as the bigger version, just in a little bit smaller size. The only thing missing is the shutters, but I really wanted to show the two versions, so if you enjoy making a bigger card, you can definitely do that easily. But if you love the look of this, but you want to make more of the quote-unquote traditional sized cards, you can do that as well. We're going to put together our cat. I've already got my windows. The curtains here is die cut from Lawn Fawn No. 2 pencil cardstock. That is that great mustard color. We used the My Favorite Things all lined up stamp to stamp the great pattern for those curtains, and the Yeti white pigment ink. So all of that's the same, just a different color of curtains. Add in some shading for the ears with R30. We'll pop our frame right over the top using that double-sided adhesive again. Anytime I can avoid the liquid adhesive, I tend to try to, because it's a little less messy. I've added shading to the molding and the flower box for this as well. So here is a look at both finished cards. This one features the Picture Book Sweet Cat, and the large 5x7 card features the Picture Book French Bulldog, Chihuahua, and Labrador. Both feature the Honeybee Stamps Cottage window to create these adorable scene cards. You could also leave the shutters off of the dog card, and this would be A2 sized as well. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this Making the Cut video featuring die-cut scene cards. Please be sure to visit the Simon Says Stamp blog for more information on this project. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.